And Vasily, please take it away.
Sure. So yeah, today I prepared like a merge request to review for us together, and it's mostly about the feature that we have. Some of you probably use it before, some of you probably it's something new for you, but we have so-called service classes, and we also have like a thing called service response that's used as a response part of the service classes. So just like a recap, like what service class is like a kind of like a missing element that the Rails does not have by default. Rails provides us like some MVC pattern, model view controller, and the business logic is supposed to be done by the model. But in reality, in many situations, we want to have some kind of business logic that it's not really connected to the model or connected to multiple models, and we want to do this step all together. And the Rails doesn't really have like a good way for that. Fortunately, we have this service class concept of that. It's like some kind of single logical step that we can apply in our code. And for example, when we need to create a new object, a new user, and we have our REST API, we have our GraphQL API, we have our controllers. And for example, before creating a user, we want to verify if we have enough permissions to do that. We want to do some kind of additional check. So we can pack all of these logical steps inside of this service class. And in this way, we can ensure that the code, that all of the verifications are done and done consistently across our applications in different versions. So we have this page, and I would recommend you to read it. It's quite nice. And actually, I reread it before the meeting, and I discovered some things I was not aware of. So it's like a useful and interesting piece of knowledge. And let's jump to the merge request. So this merge request doesn't do anything significant. It just replaces the regular commands that Rails model provides, like create, update, and delete, with the service classes, like create service, destroy service, and update service. Inside of each class, they all based on some base service class. When we do some verifications, we define what kind of like params are allowed. So we don't need to do it like every time we receive the input from the user, like from the API or from other places. There's some other logic, but the core logic is hidden, kind of not hidden, but like encapsulated inside of the execute method. So we do verification if the user can actually have like a right to create a release. In this case, we create a model, like an object in the database. And if it was successful, we return it using the service response object, or return an error. The same thing happens like for other actions, destroy and update. And as well, I replaced all of the usages of this release links create with a corresponding service in our GraphQL API and also in the REST API. I added some tests, but overall, there is like no significant changes, just like a refactoring. And also I want to show you basically what service response is, because something quite specific for the GitLab. It's a class that you can provide, like has two methods, success and error, and it will respond to these methods. For example, you can check in the code if the response was successful. Okay, let me show it to you. Example like here, for example, response success. In this case, we respond back with the object representation of this release link. If not, we return an error. And we also can take the error from the service object. So for example, here we define an error message, and this error message is here. So we can do our validations, and the execute method returns the service response object, and we can ask in our code, do the if it's successful, all good. If not, respond back with a message. it provides kind of consistent interface, and many other services follow that, but not all of them. So another thing that was asked like by the maintainer, and it was another improvement for that, we can also do, we can provide a reason. Reason in this case is like a type of the error. So it can allow us to identify, for example, if you want to provide different error responses, bad request or something else, depending on or forbidden, for example, we can also use the reason. And here is like how it's done. So all successful, okay. If not successful, then the reason, if the reason is forbidden, we return forbidden error. If something else, we return bad request error. And that allows us to remove the authorize step because it's done inside of the service. So yeah, basically that's it, what I wanted to share with you to give some idea about this service response, why we have it and how it can be used. Yeah, I would recommend you to check this page. The documentation, it's added in our meeting notes. You can find it and read. So yeah, any questions?
Do we use this in non-API controllers?
Yes, I think so. I think
How-
we use
how do you-
services.
How do we populate errors back to the main object? Do you know how that works?
Can you clarify, please, to which
Well, you know,
object?
so if you had like a user controller where you're trying to create a user, like if you didn't use a service object, you would use something. You'd do like user update with these, or user create with the params, right? And then if there's errors, that user object itself would be populated with the errors. So if you're using a service object and you're doing the validations or whatever inside the service, those errors aren't necessarily going to come back to the main object. Do you know if we do any logic like that? Do we use it?
Okay, I see what you mean. I think it depends on the errors. It's like if it's like error related to the object that you are trying to modify, for example, like here when we update, and if it's like some kind of like validation error, that it will be added to the object here, and we can access it through the like full messages.
Okay. Yeah,
but we can also have something like, you know, it's usually some kind of permissions checks or some kind of additional steps that done outside of the Rails model.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so because they all kind of errors, and the services kind of provide this consistent interface. So you just like see if it's successful or not. If it's not successful, then you don't need to figure out, oh, should I take the user object and go to the errors and like full messages, or it's like a different error that comes from somewhere else. You just access the message from the message field and respond back. So that kind of like simplifies maybe the processing of the errors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unrelated question. This the syntax here with the underscore, like you've got access denied. So I'm assuming that's translations, right?
Yeah, correct.
So I've seen these files, the POT files. What is that and how does it work? Because I haven't used that before.
I think this POT, it's like a specific format that. Okay, so how I imagine it works. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So we define this special. There is like a special way how we can define the strings that can be translated like in other languages. Then we have some piece of code that collects them through the code inside of this like POT files. And inside of POT file, we have something like that. And I think for each locale, you can like redefine this message. It's like, this is like message ID, and you can have like link does not exist, and the message string will be the same idea, but the same string, but in a different language.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know how it's connected. Like, is it like some kind of like external translators who do that? Because I saw that some translations, but I don't know who is responsible for that.
Okay.
Yeah, Amy's just called it out. It's crowd in. It's a service. But I think it's also set up that anyone can actually contribute. I guess the key thing is it's not the standard Rails I18N translations. It's another one.
Yeah, and
there is one additional thing to note about the strings. You will see on UI pages that have a lot of strings that we want to keep together, that a short descriptor will be added followed by a pipe character, so that the strings that need to belong together get sorted together in the pot file. And regenerating those, it's just a reg task. It's something I do all the time. So if you ever want to play with translations, let me know.
Which ones do we need?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I've got a point to make. I think it's really cool that we've got this class we're passing back with the response. It wasn't always the way. We used to pass back like a hash.
Yes.
And I'd actually just went and found it where it got changed. And so obviously that's not as powerful as actually passing back a class that will respond to to various messages. But I guess my other question is, like, these are essentially CRUD classes, right? Create, read, update, delete. So in theory, I think it's a little bit similar to Joe's question, but in theory, we should be able to use these for any time we need to do a create, for example, on a particular object. Would that be correct? Or are they kind of tied to the endpoint closely?
I think you can use them like anywhere, and I think it's kind of like the point when you have some logic and we want to keep this logic consistent. For example, we want to the action that user does through the UI by calling controller, creating a user, it should be the same like set of steps as the user can do when they use our API, and that's like the service class kind of ensures that in this way. And I think we use them in controllers as well.
Igor, you made a point in the chat about monads. Do you want to voice that?
No, it's just like service response classes always remind me monads from Haskell, but yeah, it's a bit different, like here. But yeah, I send the link. I think it's like a topic for
another time.
A separate meeting. Yeah.
Do we have any similar abstractions in? I guess we don't have database access, right? In Go. So we don't really have a model layer. My original question was, do we have anything similar in the Go projects? But do they have? I think they don't have a database access, right?
So, yeah, actually, yeah. If I need to answer this question, then Go has like built-in concept. I would say that it often returns errors from functions, and so in Go it's usually like an idiom to return an error from a function. So in Go it would look like a function returns result and an error, and we check if error is not nil, we do something. If it's nil, we do something.
Okay.
So yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, Vasily. That was really interesting, and it's good to see that we're constantly improving our code, and really great presentation. Thank you also for sharing it ahead of time so people had a chance to look at it. And the last point I want to make is, according to the calendar, And remember, we can always change if you're not ready, but the next one would be you, Igor, if you are ready to present something. But we can, if you're ever not ready to present, we can always skip, or someone else can take their turn. But yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. I'll stop recording.